topic this afternoon is a broad one, and I guess I look at it from a perspective of, is it philanthrocapitalism, is it social enterprise, blended value, triple bottom line, venture philanthropy? There's just, it's alphabet soup. There's so many different phrases out there to describe this right now. Matthew Bishop came out with his book in 2008, and in the beginning of the book, President Bill Clinton actually had an interesting comment about people talk about what are they going to do, people talk about how much are you going to spend, but very little attention is paid to how are you going to do it. And so today we have some of the leaders in the field across Asia, across APEC, on how you do it, in terms of how you make this difference in this blend between social difference and business difference. So I will not go through their bios because that would take the rest of the hour. But we have Professor Wu Qing from the Beijing Cultural Development Center for Rural Women. Please welcome her. Mr. Serge, the chairman of SPA Group. Okay. Ms. Cynthia Wu from the Shin Life Foundation. She wears a lot of hats, but I'll just give one title this time. And last but not least, Ms. Cherie Nursalim, actually from the executive director from the Giti group. Okay. So just to start things off to the panel, with a focus on how your organizations view this broad area of philanthrocapitalism, social enterprise, my question to you is, how do you deliver value to the communities in which you operate? Philanthrocapitalism, the phrase came out in 2008. Is this anything new, or is this simply good business practices that, that more enlightened firms have always practiced? You want to start us off? Cherie, you're on the end. Why don't we just do the round robin?
I think for us, there is, I just want to say, being in the APEC Women Forum, I think men and women do differ other than the physical. And if you look at the percentage of women in the civil society or in the social services, that there's a disproportionately large number. And I think philanthrocapitalism, in a sense, for our family, we are third generation. The women, I think from my grandmother to my mother to our generation, we have played a role in the business as well as in the bringing the business to the social scene, in the field of education or environment or other spheres. So I feel that this term, I think, is something that is one of the very different, there's a whole vernacular of terminologies, but I personally believe that this is the only way if we really would like to resolve the complex challenges that the world faces, that businesses and women playing a role, a more active role in businesses, and having, be it blended value or shared value as an objective for businesses rather than just a bottom line.
So, Brett, your question was, is this new? And my answer is no. And I actually have two quotes I'd like to share with the group today. One is actually, thank you, from, I'll just read it out first. The problem of our age is the proper administration of wealth, so that the ties of brotherhood may still bind together the rich and the poor in a harmonious relationship. And this is actually written by Andrew Carnegie in 1889 in The Gospel of Wealth. And fast forward nearly 120 years later, in Bill Gates' Harvard commencement speech in 2007, he basically talks and shares with the graduates that at Harvard he learned a lot of ideas about economics, politics, and advances in sciences, and I'm paraphrasing what he said, but essentially he says, but humanity's greatest advances are not in its discoveries, but how those discoveries are applied to reduce inequity. That is the highest human achievement. And I think from that, with capitalism and businesses and the spirit of entrepreneurship, that's always been something throughout the ages. I think it's something in the human spirit. And these are wealthy capitalists who have always noticed this inequity that is in our world. But I think that is a byproduct if we are to have civilization. And so, you know, how do you have inclusive growth, I think, is the fundamental question that we all have to address in this topic. So it is not new, and I think it's an ongoing quest and very interesting time to be talking about this with a lot of different models. So I'm very excited to hear the other group members as well. Thank you.
I think for me, philanthropy or giving back to the society, it's really not a new subject. It's something that's been going on for generations. Even 100 years ago, when people make money, they always think of donating something back. And this goes across all nations, all races, and so forth. I think somebody said earlier that Chinese have a problem. They're not used to giving, whereas you know, other nations in the West, or even the Buddhist culture in Southeast Asia, giving alms every day to the monks and so forth. It's just part of the culture. But in fact, if you look at it, wherever you are and wherever you look at, if you have a very successful business family, there's always a very big element of giving back, donations, building hospitals, universities. But in modern times, particularly in the last decade or so, I think the concept of philanthropy and the concept is now being more organized as what is popularly known as CSR, right? Corporate social responsibility, right? In our company, I think basically we want to try to define CSR as just not giving something back. Because if you are just thinking of giving something back, you pay taxes, you make some donation, and that's done. But that is very limited in its effectiveness. So we try to actually say, whatever we want to give back, we would like to leverage on that and have a multiplying effect. And it's the same old adage, you don't teach somebody, you don't give somebody food, you teach somebody how to fish, how to farm, and therefore they'll have food for good. And that's where our CSR money goes to, building schools or teaching people how to make a living. And I think that's the theme. But overall, if you're talking about it, I think it's not a new thing. It's been there for a long time, except that in the past it is not very well organized. It is actually sometimes with, in my opinion, a slightly slanted objective. You try to put your name up on a hospital or a school to perpetuate your legacy, but actually you got to do a little more than that. Not just for your own legacy, but actually really benefiting the society.
Thank you. 我现在会用中文讲。有很多人说我是做慈善，我不同意。我觉得我在尽我作为人的责任，因为从小我2岁多，妈妈就让我养狗。我说我要养狗，妈妈说好，那你要喂它吃饭，给它喝水，给它刷毛，每天得它叫回家。为什么？因为我们住在山上。所以从小妈妈培养我的是责任，因为我是人，我就有责任，我有权利也有责任，所以我想，作为人，你就应该回报，因为你不能光为自己的孩子和朋友让他们过上好日子，因为猫狗所有的动物都知道怎么样照顾自己的小崽儿。 可是我们是人，是吧？我讲这一点很重要。另外，就因为我是1937年出生的，我是51年回到新中国，我经历了所有的政治运动。那就因为我的爸爸吴文藻是社会学的，那么就被枪毙了，然后社会学被枪毙了，啊，就没有社会学了。那么等到57年，我爸爸是右派，那么我爸爸做右派以后，就有人劝我妈妈跟我爸爸离婚。我妈妈说我不会跟他离婚，我跟他想的一样。好，你要跟吴文藻想的一样，那冰心照样受到迫害，啊，因为冰心的作品的核心是爱，是一种博爱，而毛泽东强调的是以阶级斗争为纲，与人斗，其乐无穷；与天斗，其乐无穷；与地斗，其乐无穷。所以到现在斗的我们这个社会，没有爱，没有信。文革中间，我经历了80多场斗争会。说我是现行反革命，因为人家说你是吧？我的妈妈扫过3年半的厕所，我爸爸劳改队也被打，我妈妈也被打，所以我要改变。我觉得要改变中国，就必须改变农村。当然，正好90年的时候，我成了加拿大国际发展署的妇女专家，我到了甘肃的会宁，我看到了贫困。我一进村，小孩就是脱掉了带补丁的棉衣，下面穿的带补丁的棉裤，那就是他夏天穿的衣服，光着脚。是我的兄弟姐妹还那样的生活，但是报纸上我看不到。我就决定要改变中国，就要改变农村；要改变农村，就要改变妇女。教育一个妇女等于教育一家人几代人。所以后来我们就办了这个农校，是明天你们就会参观。96年、98年开始办的，99年开始招生，是吧？因为我们这个学校最大的特点，首先就改变妇女的想法，她必须懂得她是人，她先是人才是女人，男人先是人才是男人，所以男女平等。而且他们是很了不起的。我讲完了以后，那个女的马上就不一样。你看到了她从内心发出来的自信，她就是人。所以我培训都坐在一个圆圈里面，在圆圈里面没有老大，每个人都应该参与。所以我相信，是吧？她等有了自信，我去讲自由、民主、法治，因为农村现在在搞拆迁。我告诉他用法规哪些来维护自己的土地，而且也不能随便说，因为一定要有法规有证据。然后我们给他提供一个培训，所以我们也有市场的发展的培训等等等等。我现在得停了，谢谢。
She could see me being the ugly American moving in on her saying, okay, let's hear what everybody else has to say. I would actually, I'd almost disagree with one thing that she said about the element of compassion in terms of society. Is the World Food Program's done some very interesting research across many different markets and donors. And one of the things that we look at is whether or not you're willing to help people who are not of your kind. And I think the stereotype within China is that people complain when money goes outside of China to help other people, because there's still 100 million people, 150 million people living on less than $1.25 a day here in China. The research that we did was exactly the opposite, was that the Chinese people in China mainland were very willing to make donations, to equally likely to make donations outside and to help people outside in need as they were inside. And this was not exactly what we expected, so I have to disagree with you on one point. But I think it's a good thing to disagree on. Cherie, you and I had talked a little bit before about your Ideas project. Now, that started a while ago back in Indonesia, and it kind of follows along the theme that almost everybody touched on here, was about not the conflict, but there's not always a very effective liaison between governments and civil society and companies. And you've been trying to do something about that, both in Indonesia and then now recently in China. Could you share that with the audience?
Thank you, Brett. Ideas, I think it's a program that actually emerged out of hardship. I think Indonesia had went through a lot during the Asian financial crisis, 97, 98. At the time, people were saying the whole country will be broken apart. And there's 300 over ethnic groups, and we are, as an ethnic Chinese, but also a minority. And we also, at that time, went through a lot of hardship. However, actually, it's sort of inspired by a lady, Peggy Delaney, who is the daughter of David Rockefeller, who came to Indonesia and brought me to see a lot of the civil society in the country. We are in the family business, and she exposed me to the NGO world. They're working with handicapped in the villages. Some were working on supporting the rural farms, seaweed farming, all kinds. And it does not matter what happened to the whole country. These individuals, the passionate, the devoted, helping the marginalized, they continue. And it gives us a lot of hope. There are still a lot of great people. And how do we harness these positive energies? And even in business, whether it's government or business, other sectors, they're always the good part. So I think IDEAS is a program that MIT faculty, Peter Senghi and Otto Sharma, Peter Senghi, Otto, 他是第5项修炼之父. So Peter is quite known also for learning organization. And we started this foundation, United in Diversity. Actually, I think we have 3 ladies here who are from our foundation. We had this program where we have participants from 3 sectors, because there was so much distrust from each sector. The business don't trust the government don't trust the media, they don't trust the NGO, and vice versa. So it was a fragmented and precarious situation. And these leaders went through this journey. When they started this journey, it was very, very difficult. And to open up, to let go, and to emerge from that. There's this U theory that Otto encourages. And we have now almost 120 in Indonesia fellows. In China is 60 fellows from all these sectors. And they can each explain their journey and what they have done after the program to impact their own area. It has been national scale impact for a lot of these individuals, and a lot of them collaborate. And I don't want to take time, but one of the fellows just minted, this is a new book, 从美国看到中国，一位官员的旅美策记. So this is one of our fellows who from the Zhejiang, who actually wrote about the journey from America, and the process of learning and changing himself. I think earlier today, Songju said, it starts from ourselves, and this is what this program is about. Thank you.
Again, on the theme of effective cooperation between different sectors of society. Serge, you've built successful businesses in a broad variety of environments, and you could say with some very different flavors of governments as well. The last 4 years in Myanmar have been watched by the entire world as that system changes. What are some of the fundamental business or building blocks that businesses need to have in Myanmar, or quite frankly across APEC or anywhere in the world, for them to be social about their enterprises?
Well, thank you. I come from a country that's probably quite unknown to a lot of people. I come from Myanmar, and Myanmar has been isolated for 50 years. Very few people know about it. And suddenly, 3.5, 4 years ago, we opened up and we have democracy for the first time in 50 years. And it became in the spotlight, and it's now the world's darling. Everybody's rushing to Myanmar. But taking my own experience of operating in Myanmar, I think the answer to your question, there's a lot to do with government. Okay. For instance, we talk a lot about good business practices, okay? Anti-corruption, anti-graft. I personally think that corruption is basically a cancer cell. If you have that cancer cell in your body, it will kill you sooner or later if you don't eliminate it, if you don't cure it. Corruption in a society is equivalent to a cancer cell. And if you don't clean that up, the society breaks down. It simply breaks down, and you have all the ills of society coming out. So one of the things I want to say is that our government, our new government, and our current incumbent president has done a lot to eradicate, or it's going to be very difficult to totally eliminate, but he has put in a lot of effort to kill this cancerous cell, okay, through making sure that the government officials are clean, transparent, and there's governance, okay. For instance, 7 days after he became president, he abolished all the monopolies that various state enterprises, various cronies possess for 2 decades. Suddenly, they're all canceled. So you don't have a company that has monopoly to import cars or import oil or whatever. These are the things he did. So if I look back, if you want to really eradicate corruption, if you want to really go on good business ethics and good business practices, governance, compliance, one of the very important elements is government. If you don't have a government that leads and have the same concept, it will never be done. And that is why I am so encouraged of what I see in China in the last year, of what's happening, okay? At least there's a lot of effort. Yeah? 是打老虎还是打苍蝇？咱们这个各种各的说法，但起码在打。哎，以前是假打，现在是好像是真打。那么起码我个人来讲啊 ，I think I'm very encouraged by what I see. You got to start from the government, because there's a buy side and a sell side. Okay? The buy side is the government, and the sell side is business. Most of the time, we focus on the sell side, and why do you bribe the government officials, right? Well, there's a buy side too. They want it. So I think to have good practices and then to give back to society, you've got to do something about the government. And as far as the business community is concerned, I think as a whole, businessmen do not want to pay bribes if they can afford not to. Why would I want to pay a bribe if I can do business without paying? But the culture is that if you don't pay, you cannot do business. That's why you end up paying. So you got to kill both sides, the buy side and the sell side. That's my view. And over the last 30 years, if you look at the economies, particularly the emerging economies, a lot of success stories, China, Thailand, Indonesia, and so on, right? And in Latin America, But a lot of these economies still have a lot of poor people. And why is that? I think it's basically corruption will not allow the fruits of the economic progress to trickle down. It gets siphoned off sideways into the pockets of small number of people. And the vast masses are still very poor. So you've got to get that away. And I think we've got to start from government.
Interesting. I at least for me, my own personal experience with the Bashang Guiding, it's when it initially started month to month, we saw a difference. But now I almost start to wonder if there's a bit of overreach, because now it's for me to actually go have a coffee, literally, with my counterpart at one of the ministries. They have to have approval from their boss, okay, at almost any level to do this. So I start to wonder if it's getting a little bit too tight.
If I may add to that, I don't think you could ever overreach.
Okay.
I think it's good. I think you got to start from the most elementary level. I'm hoping that our schools in China, or in ASEAN, our schools will have in their curriculum subjects that say corruption is bad, that it should be shameful to be corrupt. Now, our schools don't teach that. The culture is, it's normal. Corruption is normal. Bribery is normal. It is not frowned upon. But when you get to a country where rule of law prevails, it's frowned upon. You would never imagine somebody doing that, giving a bribe to get a permit, a license. And we need to start that in Asia, from the school, from the kids, where they will grow up frowning upon corruption. And then the issue will not exist where he will have to have permission from his leaders to have coffee with you, because having coffee with you is not a corrupt act. Okay?
As far as I know, I have pretty normal coffee. That's right. No, one of the points that you made too about the number of poor people in these developing economies. Last year, the World Food Program had done some work on the middle-income countries, and they found that 80% of the world's hungry right now are in middle-income countries. They're not even in LDCs. They're in countries like China. They're in countries like Mexico, in Brazil, in Pakistan. I mean, they're in the middle-income countries. So in an ironic way, many of the countries are actually facing the same challenges. If I look at food insecurity from my area, there actually are a greater percentage of American children that are food insecure than China right now, by a large margin. And most people are shocked to hear that, but that's the case. Cynthia, to get back on to, not on my favorite topic, which is food, but more on the philanthrocapitalism side, your family has seen, you know, across the generations an evolution in Asia of these changes, of how capitalism has changed. And again, Taiwan, a very interesting example in terms of what's happened there. I mean, how do you benchmark these changes? How do you, what are the kind of the major takeaways that you've seen? And especially because you wear a couple different hats. You wear corporate hats, you wear philanthropy hats. I mean, how do you see this playing out?
Well, just in terms of my background, I'm from Taiwan. I come from a third-generation family business. We've been around, Xinguang has been around for over 70 years. We have over 30 companies within our group, and we start off in manufacturing. We have real estate, financial services, and also Xinguang Tiandi 在北京也是我们其中一个joint venture. And 我的爷爷是无火师，是白手起家的 ，and 他只有一个小学教育，然后在日据时代的时候，非常的辛苦。然后我的曾祖父，是在给日本人盖铁路的时候呢，残废了，然后当时的药是用鸦片来做 painkiller， 所以那时候我的曾祖母呢，本来是跟他定亲，可是大家就劝他不要嫁给他，他就还是决定嫁给他。那时候他是裹小脚的，所以 she unbound her feet and and 嫁给我这个曾祖父. So they had my grandfather came from a drug-addicted, crippled father with a very strong mother that raised the family. And when he first started his business, he was not even 20 years old, and he was a textile assistant in a Japanese merchant shop in Taipei, which is now 我们叫迪化街，是一个商铺的店. And his first job was actually looking after the stock when the bomb was dropped by the Americans. And fast forward when he died, over 20 years ago, he left 17 companies, and then my father took over. I would say my grandfather was a great role model. I've known him until I was 10 years old. We lived together in a household. And 因为我们儒家有说，取之社会，用之社会，所以爷爷非常觉得说，当他在需要帮助的时候，人家没有 any expectation 的时候，会愿意帮助他。他相信说他有这个力量，也要帮助别人。So in our family, it was never a question. But in his generation, I would say it's very traditional. It's all with donations. And 像台湾有很多庙，那庙口区最大的庙呢，就是日月潭。可能在座的可能观众有去过 Sun Moon Lake， and 那前面的2尊大的石狮子是我爷爷捐的，所有几乎的台湾的庙口就是狮子都是爷爷捐的，或是说像台湾有很多地震啊、台风啊，赈灾的时候呢，星光也做很多的这个急难救助的部分，所以连星光人寿的部分，其实我现在管这个基金会，今年已经第31年了，的历史。那基金会刚开始还没成立的时候，是业务线的人去乡下，觉得这些人很可怜，跟总公司讲。爷爷就拨一点钱给他们，所以是我觉得慈善是一个很 fundamental 一个 showing compassion 的部分。So, but in his generation, it was all knee-jerk reaction. It was very reactive and just passing things over whenever needed. But in my father's generation, and he's still alive, fortunately, it's more about institutionalizing it. And he built a hospital, which my grandfather did not complete. He set up various charities, of one of which that I run. And he's all about equality and accessibility. And he's managed to pull the group together and making things more accessible. So for example, 17年前，巴黎的罗丹美术馆的展览，我的父亲就是让残障人士来触摸这些雕塑品，他直接跟巴黎说，要我赞助的话，一定要有这些条件，或是说他请身心家庭侵害的小朋友们来在冷门的时间可以有一些 tour， 因为这么好的 collection 让更多人能欣赏等等的，所以他的出发点，他还是那个 Isaac Perlman 那个有名的小提琴家，他来台湾，他说残而不废，中国有一句话，希望说能给他们这个机会欣赏他的演奏会等，所以他的精神是把企业整合，有些 institutionalized 的部分来做。And in my generation, it's about strategic philanthropy. And 我觉得其实在昨天我见到的一些panelists, I was very inspired. 因为 strategic philanthropy 就是策略性慈善，就是用 piloting, scaling up, rolling out 这种东西，我觉得是已经慢慢是一个绝对是一个风气在中国。But I think the other thing to push for and talk about is about CSV, which is shared values, creating shared values. Creating shared values 就是说，其实企业呢 CSR 是讲是 do good， 那CSV 呢是说，其实你企业可以结合你一些核心精神，可是你是可以赚钱的。如果是 CSR 的话，好像说只是一个开支而已，其实 CSV 是可以a much more integrative, much more competitive way. And I just want to wrap up by giving 3 short examples that we do at Shin right now to create this shared value. One is servicing the poor. We are a premium brand in the market, but we actually have begun selling micro-insurance. And it's about extending that value. We are still selling insurance. We're still doing what we do best. But we're just servicing an area of the market that's never been served before. 就是把饼画得更大. And then the other example is in terms of the elderly. 我们是台湾第一个企业是卖保单给 over 70-year-olds. And We started last year. We now have 40% market share. People didn't think that was even possible when we first started that. And then also through our Jijinghui, we have an elderly arts therapy program with the National Center of Creative Aging in the United States, founded by Susan Pearlstein, who was Clinton's advisor on elderly issues. And 我们用艺术治疗帮政府把这些退休的成本降低，所以我其实有一些 metrics 是可以协助 government 自己也可以做慈善，甚至于说我们把这个传承艺术的单位呢变成社会企业有 spin off， 那可以自己 generate 一些 income。And then the final piece to also share is 不好意思，刚刚那个部分我们在10个都市跟80个单位服务这个传承艺术的这个，但是台湾规模比较小，可是就是说以台湾讲话 ，we're very proud of that， 10年前就开始做。那第3个部分的话，就是其实做 seed funding 的部分，就是因为觉得我们的家人都是企业家创业，像连我自己创业的时候呢，我们家里就是1:1 1:1的 ratio 来投资，就是 you must put your money where your mouth is, and have accountability, even in our own family. And also in the businesses we actually invest in, recently, we're very proud to say that, especially in this women's audience, we gave a grant to Perseus Strategies, which is convening all the living Nobel Prize winners by the end of this year on the UN bill called 1325. It's the bill on women's rights set in the millennium. And next year is the 15th anniversary of 1325, and it's about setting new goals for women's development for the next 15 years. So what we like to do is also to seed other people with a similar spirit in also the various enterprises that we're involved in. So, and letting that spirit of entrepreneurship extend beyond our own family.
Okay, wow.
Thank you.
There's a list. I want to actually, is Julie here from UN Women? Is she in the audience? She's probably in this next speaker's room. You should meet Julie from UN Women. She might be an interesting contact for you. From all of the things that you said there, at least the thing that stuck out for me is, and this may seem surprising coming from a United Nations official, but I have my career is private sector. I've only recently joined the United Nations, and at least I think I'm in the most capitalistic part of it. But you talked about extending services. It's something that you already did well, and you're extending it to a broader group in terms of the microfinance or the microinsurance. And at least for me, and again, may sound strange coming from someone from the World Food Program, but it's not going to be my organization that ends hunger or ends poverty. It's going to be economic development. It's going to be investment here. But let's dream big. Okay. Professor Wu, you want to change the world.
Right.
We all want to change the world, but,
yes.
But when we were talking beforehand, before coming up here, she said, I want to change the world. Where do we start? That's a big question, but where,
yeah.
And we talked about the corporates, but there's a huge group of people that are not in the cities.
Yeah. 我说我想改变世界，但是我首先要改变自己。每一个人都得从自己做起，因为我们每一个人都应该是活到老，学到老。我们每一个人都应该是不断的去反思，就是我们为什么活在这个世界上，就你为什么？另外，你怎么看你周边的人？如果周边人活得不好，你觉得好吗？所以这个时候，你一定要把人，每一个人放在自己的心里。我觉得这一点，我的爸爸和妈妈吴文藻、谢冰心就教育我，就是我妈妈从来不觉得自己怎么样，她就是一个人，但是她的爱是博爱，她爱世界上凡是有生命的，她都爱，所以从小就叫我要尊重生命，狗啊、猫啊、鸡啊、鸭呀，全要爱，树木、花草都爱。因为要没有他们，就没有我们。所以你像我这个学校建的时候，是我妈妈在95岁的时候出了冰心的全集，她把第一次的稿费9万多人民币 全捐给我了。那时候我妈妈写稿子是1000字，30块人民币。她是爬格子，不像歌星一出场就是多少钱，她很少的钱，但是她捐了。所以我想，我们每一个人成长一定要有榜样。你像01年我得了那个拉蒙麦克塞塞奖，奖励我5万美金，我这个美金在银行。我希望大家来匹配我，比方说我这5万是捐的，有人捐10万美金，那我就是我的双倍。我这个学校现在是就是1层楼，已经在那儿16年了，最多只能招150人。如果我有钱
Tell us more about what the university does and rural women.
其实我是觉得啊，我就改变他们的思维方式，我教他捕鱼，而不是给他鱼，他一定要独立。而且我们鼓励妇女参政，基层街去参政，去做村长，去做支书，要把妇女的声音发出来。因为你们要注意，中国的农村70%以上土地是被污染，水是被污染。是吧？比方说，现在钢铁厂、造纸厂、皮鞋厂、石灰厂，这些全污染。他们要知道，把这些厂得搬开，因为一旦城里所谓的要缩紧了，不许污染，这些厂全到了我们的农村呢。所以我们的第一课我都上，就是法治，一定要懂得用法规来维护姐妹们的权利和自己的权利。我们培训了40个人，6个人进了村长，当了村长，他们的声音就要发出来。所以我觉得在座的每一个人，如果你随时的发出自己的声音，但是你要知道，不是你个人，是周边姐妹的一个人就顶10个人，而我们一般都是不说话。现在中国可怕的不是坏人的嚣张，而是好人的极度的沉默。所以我是觉得，像我这个农校，我就有培训16岁到20岁的女孩子做托儿所老师，到农村去办，因为农村的孩子也需要得到爱。因为尤其是流动子女的孩子，他们很多人不懂得爱，因为父母都忙着赚钱去了，他恨父母。有的女孩子不懂得性，因为没有人告诉她，所以为什么校长会去开房间，老师在强奸我们的孩子，是吧？所以我们有这个，另外我们还培训速记 stenotypists。他们这样呢，可以找到更好的工作。另外，妇女的话呢，我们有创业班，培训乡一级的女老师班，照顾老年人和月嫂，是吧？我们这些都只要农村妇女需要，我们就培训，因为她一定要独立，一定要自主，而且要懂得去关心别人。我们的校训是团结、自立、分享、共建。我们的学生自己捐钱，知道吗？他们有的把第1个月的工资1/4捐了，为什么？他愿意帮助和没来我们学校以前的人。我觉得中国人跟别人没有两样。解放以前，其实我们没有那么多地主，你知道，那个刘文彩是假的，白毛女是假的，南霸天是假的。半夜鸡叫是假的，高玉宝是假的。我们过去一些地主是修路、修桥、建庙、办学校。刘文彩是一个开明的地主，他用2亩地去换农民的1亩地来办学校。为什么？因为我们国家是说你行你就行，不行也行；你行说你不行，行也不行，横批不服不行，是吧？所以。我除了做这个慈善，我还做过人民代表。我在中国是第1个用宪法的，第1个用宪法给自己规定每礼拜2接待选民，因为我要听人民的声音。我是第1个根据宪法向选民汇报，因为 监督者必须受监督，没有监督的，绝对产生腐败。所以我想，我们每一个企业是你一个人说了算，还是有一个理事会，是吧？所以我是觉得，我们大家一定要严守，就是不是你一个人说了算。所以像我们的农校，我们有19个职工，我们都上了保险。他们都有所有人该享受的，所以我觉得企业都应该依照劳保走，就是你要守法，是吧？所以我就觉得我们每一个人都要学联合国人权宣言，每个人都学中国的宪法。中国的宪法只有你每一个人都尊重才行。因为我最近到有的地方去讲，是一个学法的博士跟我讲，他说：“你知道吗？我们中国的宪法 no teeth。”我说：“谁说的？是领导。”我说：“领导凭什么说这个？因为我们宪法第5条，任何组织和个人不得超越宪法和法律的特权，这个包括执政的中国共产党。根据中华人民共和国的宪法，最高权力机构是全国人民代表大会，而不是别的，是吧？Sorry.
I think I keep saying I might interject, I might interrupt, but she keeps getting applause, so I have to kind of keep going. So, well said. One of the points that you made was about, I guess I would say, performance and measurement of performance. And I guess I look at it in terms of some of the goals that we have, or that we've been talking about, a more enlightened civil society, or more engaged employees, or, I mean, these are very broad, very fuzzy topics. Can you tell us, the panelists, one more question for everyone, and then we can open it to the audience. Just briefly, what are the thoughts that you have on how you're measuring the impact of what you're doing? Not just input and outputs that come, but what are the actual outcomes, and how this ties back to your business? Serge, you have the mic. Why don't you start us off?
If I have a choice, I'd rather listen to her.
Well, we're going to come back, because I want to see how she, from the rural universities for women, how do they measure their impact? To me, that's a very interesting topic. But give us a little bit, and then we'll give the mic back to her.
So what is the question? Sorry.
So how do you measure the impact of the social side? So, you know, again, we use all of these different phrases, but there's very clear bottom line profitability terms for the for-profit businesses. But on the philanthropy side, how do you measure whether you're succeeding or not?
You know, I think it's sort of a misconception and a myth that philanthropy, charity, is a losing business. In other words, you give away, you give away. Well, if you think seriously, you couldn't give away anything if you didn't have it in the first place. So you've got to make it first before you give away, which means you've got to make the profit first and then give away. If you didn't have anything, you wouldn't have anything to give anyway. So the concept of just giving away and being charitable, I think it's not sustainable. It has to be something that you will continue to make money so that you can continue to give.
But how do you measure your impact? I agree with you completely, but you have to make money to be able to make that difference. A failed business isn't going to keep people in employment, right. But how do you measure the impact of your more social enterprise or the more social side?
For us, the impact is actually on the results. If you did something that really touches people, improves people's life, it will show. Okay? It has to show, okay? Because you did the right thing, it will show. To give you an example, when Nagas came to Myanmar and hit, there was widespread destruction. And there was a lot of charitable goods and relief goods sent in. Now, these goods are all perishable. So after a few months, the goods will be gone.
Yep.
Okay? What we did was we actually went into an island and said, this island is totally devastated. There was no house left. Everybody is gone. 700 people live on the island. Today, there are only 320 left that's registered in the refugee center. So by deduction, the rest have died. Okay? So we went in and we built a new village for this 320 people that's left. But when we build that village again, we actually master planned it. We put in a water tank that's powered by a solar pump. So, and then we run the pipe. So every hut now has got running water. Something they have never had in their whole life, running water in a hut where they live in. But it's so simple. You just put up a tower, you pay for the tower, you pay for the solar electricity that pumps the water up, and they now have water. Every family, if you're a fisherman, we give you like a boat and a fishing net. If you're a farmer, we give you back a buffalo, right? So you can start making a living again. And I think that's the measurement, the impact. You will show. And if you don't do it right, you give somebody something, the next month he's hungry again because it's gone. And there is no impact.
Confucius, teach him how to fish. Cynthia, how do you guys measure impact?
Well, I think the obvious ones would be things like sustainability and scalability, but I'd also like to add other areas to think about, which is one is looking at your own organization and your company value chain. So in terms of transportation, procurement, for our businesses, are we energy efficient? Could we be more energy efficient? And could we save more on, needless costs and so forth? I mean, take an example. There's a very well-known waste company in India, and they just collect garbage to start with. But then they decided, actually, we're going to recycle, and we're going to get carbon credits, and then sell the compost and so forth. So it's still sticking with your core business and also finding ways to extend on that. So you can do it either by optimizing your existing business or going down the value chain. Yes, and then I think also the other thing I talked about earlier was about looking at wider objectives, like national government objectives. In a case with elderly care, for example, certain statistics. We think that some of the projects that we do are going to keep elderly people healthier for longer, which will save social costs. So those are the things that we measure. And my final thing I'd like to say is that I think there's a real need for collaboration between government and corporations to allow for some degree of creative capitalism, to allow corporates to have some breathing space. 就是说可以换一个方法想，假设是做食品公司好了 if you're doing a food company, then maybe it's not only about the calories per pack, that the government might have some health initiatives, there might be some vitamin deficiencies. Well, then let's put in these nutritional benefits and try to promote policies which allow food companies to come up with new products that might help that. And there are a lot of nuance. I think if you actually have government and private collaborations where you have an end objective in mind and give each other some of that flexibility to have that dialogue and explore, I think we could come up with more interesting solutions on how philanthropy can evolve and address the social challenges of the 21st century. Thank you.
One of the new models that I've seen that's emerging right now within China is the government is so interested in getting the private sector involved with some of the poverty alleviation activities, especially in the South and the West, in the 680 poverty counties of China, that this is a little plug for the World Food Program, I admit, they've actually offered to match donations from private sector companies that are focused on projects for rural poverty alleviation, a lot of it agriculturally oriented, so you and I should talk. Cherie, can you give us a little bit on how you measure the impact?
Yeah, I think there was a chart that I've seen where you have, I think you talked about, the government encouraging donations. So donations or just charities on the one end where it's actually could be negative in terms of the cash flow side, but it has
a positive
social impacts and returns. Then there is the aspect of the social investment where the social returns should actually exceed the business returns, but you still expect business return for more sustainability of that. And then on the other hand, you have the sort of just being corporately, socially responsible, where you are still a business looking at bottom line as a priority, but you still expect to have a win-win or win-win-win return in your bottom line or a shared value concept. However, I personally feel that I think in all these different measurement tools and I mean, whether it's more S or more E, and whether you, I think the most important is to define yourself within your own initiative, depending on sort of which of the initiative in which of the areas, to really understand the real outcome that you would like to achieve. Okay. And then from there, you look at devising the right tool.
Interesting. A thought experiment for the audience. I don't have the answer yet, but so for example, we have a high net worth donor that gave us $2 million, and but the intent was to kick us out of Bhutan. So their job, I mean, the remit was to kick us out of Bhutan, to train the government to the point where they didn't need the World Food Program anymore, especially to run the school feeding program. And the gentleman who's the advisor for this, Jed Emerson, is one of the people globally who's working on shared values in terms of, or blended value, a social return on capital and a financial return. And we looked at this, and we actually don't know how to measure the value of that. What is the value of getting the World Food Program out of Bhutan forever and having the government be able to run their own program? And that's kind of an interesting thing we're thinking about. So, you and I are looking at the clock. Yes. So, you can have it as long as you can keep them applauding. No, you can do that anyway. So please, Professor Wu.
我想我们学校很重要的一个就是我们对职工所有的劳保都有，另外呢，就我们的职工也在成长。你比方像我们有职工是我们自己学校毕业的，从西安来的，2001年，他后来呢就是管我们的后勤，什么洗被窝呀、弄发屋子里头的打扫。他后来我们让他发展，他去教我们幼儿园老师画画和做手工，就是每一个人都必须成长，他才觉得我做这个工作有意义，是吧？所以我们的职工都在成长，本来不能教书的要教书，他一个人是扮演很多的角色，他有用。是吧？另外呢，我们也，比方说像我们农校，每一年冬天的煤不用出钱，是当地政府支持我们，因为我们也改变了政府对我们的看法。因为我们这个学校很重要的是绝不腐败，你捐了钱我们就上网，我们不像他说是我自己得先赚钱，我没钱，但是我能帮你培养 ，You give me the money and 你给我钱我就办班，然后最后你看我的人全变了。因为刚来的时候，你叫什么名字？我叫吴清。他害怕，过2天他马上看着你的眼睛说话，什么？他自信了，而且他回去改变了他的对孩子的教育。比方说，我们还有一个小姑娘，在我们学校是学的是做这个美容美发，她回去自己开了个铺子。办了2年，他结婚以后生孩子不能做了，他干嘛呢？等他孩子长大，他干嘛？他就学了，自己学会计，因为我们说了活到老学到老，现在又进入会计的行业，这就是我们的人。我们培养了13700多，明天你们大概没多少时间，没有多少时间来，但是呢，这个。你们随时欢迎你们来，而且你们可以那样，你们只要给我们学校赚钱，我们就上网，而且希望大家监督我们，谢谢。
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to a close of this session. It's a topic that I think we could go on for quite a bit. I wouldn't mind, well, if you guys are free for dinner, let me know. But I wouldn't mind continuing the conversation afterwards. Can I please have a round of applause for our panelists, please? And I'll leave you with one thought from the Philanthrocapitalism book that Matthew Bishop said. And this was again from President Clinton's comments. Our independent world is too unequal, unstable, and unsustainable. We do, however, have a better opportunity now than ever before to transform it into one of shared responsibilities, shared opportunities, and a shared sense of community. It's my hope that, and that's President Clinton, my comment is that it's my hope that it's some of you, not just the people on the stage, that will someday be able to deliver on this promise. Thank you.